Hello and welcome to Band Literature Reviews with Brandon and Searles. Band Literature Reviews is a series that evaluates concert band music from the perspective of a small school director. This is episode 3, Holst and Sousa. In today's show, I will discuss two pieces of concert band music: Holst's First Suite in E-flat for military band, and Sousa's Liberty Bell March. I hope you enjoy episode 3, Holst and Sousa. Hello again, everybody. Welcome to the third episode of my YouTube channel here. I am really excited to be with you guys again today and discuss some more concert band pieces with you. I've been enjoying this process of recording so far, and I'm looking forward to all the other pieces of music that we're going to explore, and I've already been planning ahead for future episodes and stuff like that. So if you would like to have any particular pieces as part of my show, feel free to reach out to me and I'll give you some more information on that at the end of the episode. But you can find me at BandLitReviews here on YouTube, and you can comment on my videos, or you can find me at bandlitreviews@gmail.com. So for today, I have a piece of music that is very near and dear to my heart, and near and dear to a lot of people's hearts in the band world, which is the First Suite in E-flat for military band by Holst. Let's go ahead and get right into it and listen to the recording. All right. Welcome back, everybody. So, let's go ahead and discuss this piece. First off, this is a really, really long piece of music. There are a lot of things to consider with it and a lot of things to talk about. So, that's part of the reason I decided to do 2 pieces instead of 3 today. Let's go ahead and get right into that. Let's start with about the composer, Gustav Holst. Like I said before, Gustav Holst is probably my favorite composer of all time. I am a huge Gustav Holst fan. Some of his other pieces include obviously his famous and well-known Second Suite in F for military band, as this one, the Planet Suite, and of course many, many others. Moving on to the grade level. So this is listed as a grade level 3. There are a lot of edits and changes and tweaks in here that Robert Longfield did to make this more approachable, partially in the way that the parts are written and partially with taking out some more or less extinct instruments, such as like a bass saxophone or E-flat horns. Basically, this is the modernization of the Holst First Suite in E-flat. So, just a little bit about the piece. This is a very unique style, first off. It's a multi-movement. It has the chaconne, it has the intermezzo, and it has the march that it concludes with. Which is funny because my last episode we talked about how marches usually come first in the order, but Holst had a completely different idea here. This arrangement is published by Boosey and Hawkes. It was published in 2006, and there are a variety of different tempo markings and all sorts of slowing down and speeding up between those as well. But each of the movements at the start of the movement is 88 beats per minute, 140 beats per minute for the second movement, and 126 beats per minute for the march. Going to instrumentation. This is a very, very full band instrumentation. And as I said before, this is evolved from what Holst originally wrote. The numbers have stayed mostly the same, and like I said, some of the instruments that Holst had back in his day have become superfluous or extinct, not needed anymore. And so this is the new version of this for today's modern band, like I said. Now, talking about the ranges and the challenges. First off, the trumpets have written up to a high C above the staff. However, this is an optional note, and there are some notes in the programming notes that Robert Longfield put in there because he deliberately changed a few things to keep it at a grade level 3. One of the things was he didn't want to notate much above a G above the staff. And he was thinking about going to there, and then he was like, oh, well, we have to get up to the A. We have to be able to have the first trumpet play that A. And then he said it wouldn't really be Holst though if we didn't get up to the high C, so he wrote it in with an optional lower note to be able to hit instead. In some cases, the F if it was an F chord on the trumpets. In some cases, a G if it was a C chord in the trumpets. So there were a few things that were put in there that made it more accessible for younger groups. Also, speaking of trumpets, there were some very awkwardly low trumpet parts as well. The trumpets would have to have a really firm command of the entirety of their instrument. Like, there were some parts where the first trumpet would have to go down to like a low A or a low G below the staff, which that is not the typical first trumpet range or calling. Being able to play across the entire range of the trumpet, being able to play, 3 full octaves plus is definitely demanding on the trumpet. Also, there's some limited altissimo notes for clarinet. The horns get up to high Fs on the top of the staff, which is definitely your high school players kind of situation. There are trombones going up to high Fs above the staff and all kinds of accidentals going on. The other thing to consider is a polyphonic texture that happens a lot of the time. There's a lot of competing melodies that Holst wrote that are absolutely beautiful and gorgeous, and part of the reason that I just love listening to and playing this piece. But at the same time, playing multiple melodies at the same time is really hard to do. As such, it requires a lot of instrumental independence. There are not a lot of like instruments playing together at once. There are less of those groupings and lumpings, and each part has its own unique part that it has to stay committed to and be able to track with and do accurately. Another interesting thing, and this is something that I learned during my master's, so credit to the euphonium player Gail Robertson. She used this piece as an example because the euphonium baritone part doesn't just go and copy the tubas like it does in most mature or semi-mature literature for band. And it doesn't just do the trombone line either like it does in beginning band or grade level 1, grade level 2 type pieces. It has its own thing where it will have a melody that it plays that put it more in like a trumpet or French horn range, which is just crazy. But it's one of those standard pieces of literature where this is a moment for the baritone and euphonium to shine. And there are, I think, 2 solos in the span of this piece between all the movements where the euphonium is featured for a solo. And speaking of that, there are also a lot of other solo parts that are present in a lot of the other parts, especially clarinet, flute, oboe, trumpet, trombone. Almost every instrument has its chance for a solo in this piece of music. Talking about rhythms and percussion, there are all kinds of challenges in this. There are lots of part switching for the percussionists and a lot of really challenging dynamics for the percussionists. It's very demanding in the sense that there's a specific sound and style that's trying to be achieved, and if you're not able to play at the correct dynamics, that feeling is lost, which is really, really tough to deal with. The number of different meters in this is considerable, so it would take a lot of music literacy on the parts of your players, and especially percussionists, to be able to do all sorts of stuff in cut time, in 3/4 time, in 6/8 time shows up in there, I think, as well. 2/4 time. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this that your players will have to be able to work with. For my overall recommendation, I'm going to say probably not for any small school. Once again, as I always say, you know your band better than I do, and if you want to take it on, then you definitely can. Unfortunately, there are no other orchestrations like flex arrangements or anything like that for this, so that makes it a little bit harder. And the only other additions beyond this are like the Frederick Fennell version, like the original Holst version of it that he wrote, and not a whole lot else because it's such a venerated piece and the rights are protected very closely. That being said, you would need to have a band of about 30 students perfectly instrumented that way to be able to make it so that every part is covered. It would be more comfortable with 40 or 50 people playing because the parts are just that important. Every single part is important. So numbers would definitely be an issue. The other key to success is having solid part independence with your instrumentalists. Like, have them know their instrument's role and be able to emulate that role again and again in different ways, different forms, different dynamics, different tempos. There's just a lot of demand on the individual player in this. Your band should also have some experience with polyphonic texture, playing maybe like an arrangement of a Bach fugue or any other kind of polyphonic pieces of music. I would not make this your first adventure into polyphony with your band. This is pretty much going to demand all high school level players. Each instrument has its own set of challenges. All the clarinets go over the break. You know, the trombones are playing above the staff a lot. The trumpet parts, all of them have some certain unison parts where they're asked to get all the way up to, say, a high G above the staff. And there's not a skill level accommodation in this. It's every person on every part needs to be solid. That being said, once again, I really, really like this piece. It's one of my favorites, but you're probably never going to see me program this for my small school band. If I do end up playing this, it's probably going to be at a future career point of mine. So, once again, this was First Suite in E flat by Gustav Holst. And we'll go ahead and move on to our second piece, which is going to be the Liberty Bell March by Sousa. Let's go ahead and transition over to that piece. All right, let's go ahead and get into the discussion of it. So, this is, once again, the Liberty Bell March by John Philip Sousa. This is rescored by Bill Holcomb and John Burkett. The key signature is varied. There's E flat major, A flat major, and B flat major that appear in that order, actually. This is a march style piece. I'm considering it a grade level 3 with this arrangement of it. It is about 4 minutes long. It's 116 measures, so definitely considerable. The publisher on my version is Musicians Publications, and it was published in the year 1975. The tempo is 120 beats per minute in 6/8 time. A little bit about the composer. Most of you probably already know about John Philip Sousa. I don't need to say too much more than that. This is very much in his traditional style. We have the first strain, the second strain, we have the trio, we have the dogfight, and then the return of the first strain. And, trombones screaming away at certain points in time, and we all know that the trombones just love that, right? This is very much the typical John Philip Sousa type piece. As far as the grade level is concerned, I consider it kind of deceptive. At first glance, it seems kind of hard. But there are a lot of things in this from studying the score that make it very approachable. I find it a little bit surprising given how John Philip Sousa would write, demanding things for the bands that he wrote for, including his own. Jumping on to instrumentation, this is not too bad overall. The tenor and bass line have adaptable parts. What I mean by that is, for example, the trombones could play either the bass line or the tenor line. And there's a lot of room for switching around there. It's not quite a flex arrangement, but it has a little bit of that flexibility that would make it possible to tweak easily without having to necessarily rewrite parts. There's one horn part, there are 3 trumpet parts, 2 clarinet parts, 2 flute parts, and the rest is pretty common, straightforward stuff. Range and challenges, the trumpets frequently go up to a high A above the staff, so that's definitely a challenging aspect of this. And sometimes that's approached by an octave jump. So you have to jump from an A, second space in the staff, to an A above the staff. That's definitely a challenge, so the trumpets have it cut out for them. The thing that I really found surprising in a good way was that there are 2 clarinet parts, but only one goes over the break. I would not expect that from Sousa. In all the Sousa marches I've played on clarinet, there have not been any of them that kept the clarinets below the break. And so I was stunned to find that out, that there's this arrangement out there that does do that. The horn part is not too difficult. It only goes up to a middle C just a few times. It doesn't go and dwell in that territory, so very, very manageable for a younger French horn player. The trombone part is not too bad either, as long as they can get that characteristic Sousa marchy sound. Once again, having a little bit of background in knowing marches would definitely help out for the trombone player here especially. The rhythms and the percussion in this is a bit challenging too, as long as your group has a solid foundation for 6/8 time, which a middle school group definitely can. It should be pretty manageable. So there are a lot of different rhythms in 6/8 time to contend with, like the continuous eighth notes, paired in groups of 3, and then there are some stare drum parts where they get some really interesting 16th note, 8th note combinations. But once again, like if you have some older confident percussionists that are right at that line between middle school, high school level, even if they're a certain grade, but they're playing a little bit lower than that grade or a little bit higher than that grade, if they're at that early high school level, they could definitely manage it. One of the really interesting things also that makes it approachable is there are 2 different snare drum parts. I've never seen that before either. Granted, I haven't conducted a whole lot of music myself and looked at a whole lot of scores this relatively early in my career, but it's great to see this stuff and see how different composers decided to write and different people decided to rescore things. One of the snare drum parts is a lot easier than the other, so that's another thing that makes it easier. So if you have a couple of snare drum players, say like a younger 6th or 7th grade snare drummer and then like a 9th grade snare drummer that's taking them under their wing for this piece, they can easily play these complementing snare drum parts, and it's really quite interesting. That second snare drum part is optional. You don't have to do it. That being said, only 3 percussionists required, but you could have 4 or more on unique parts. Not too bad overall. I would say, once again, proceed with caution. I'd lean towards no myself because my groups, as I've mentioned before, have not had a lot of experience in 6/8 time. That would definitely show in this, and I think it would take too much time to prepare. The parts of this that factor into that decision, the keys to success on doing this particular piece, would be navigating the 3 different key signatures, concert, B flat major, concert, A flat major, in concert E flat major, doing 2, 3, and 4 flats in the key signature, that would definitely be a lot to manage. And my group doesn't track super well with that. Once again, your guys' groups out there might be able to handle doing that and make it a worthwhile venture. If they know their key signatures and get that down, then it would be pretty easy for them to get it under their grasp. The other key to success would be having a confident low brass and low wind section. They carry the melody and counter melody pretty often. And once again, like knowing that typical Sousa, trombone, baritone, euphonium parts would be really hard if they didn't know how to emulate that style. If they feel confident in themselves and have some march experience, then definitely would be a great candidate for your low winds, low brass section. You would need to have at least some of the clarinets that would be able to cross the break and be able to do it pretty proficiently and confidently, because they are noodling around up there. It's not like full-on runs, but there are some trickier parts fingering-wise that would be hard for a beginning clarinet player that just got over the break. You would definitely need to have somebody who's had experience playing over the break. For another key for success, you would definitely need to have a mature trumpet section. The trumpets really don't get off scot-free right here on this one. They need to know their stuff really well. If you have that killer trumpet section where your trumpet players just are killing it and you have uncommonly good middle school trumpet players, then yeah, go for it. If you don't have super confident trumpet players, then that would be really, really tough, and it would show almost immediately because of how often the trumpets have the melody. And then lastly, your group should have good dynamic awareness. There are so many different dynamics, and because this is a march, the dynamics either make or break it, because it's just typical of the style. You know, with the repeats and the first and second endings, there are times where it'll be quiet the first time, but loud the second time. There'll be points in time where it'll be competing sounds, where the trombones and the brass go back and forth with the woodwinds, and being able to play that at a volume level to compare with one another and do that accurate fighting back and forth kind of thing, it would be really, really hard to do if your group did not know how to manage their dynamics and their balance. That being said, there are some other arrangements of this. This is a pretty popular march. Once again, going to one of those go-to middle school composers, Andrew Ballant. He does an arrangement of this that's not as small band friendly. It's the same grade level, but there are a lot more parts to distribute. The thing is, and I didn't mention this before, but I should mention it now, this Holcomb and Burkett rescoring edition is no longer in print, which is something that I'm kind of starting to suspect a lot of the pieces in my library are going to be, just judging by the publication dates. You will have to find a different arrangement. I think it would be something that your group could manage, maybe on the Andrew Ballant version of it. So that is everything that I have for you guys on Liberty Bell March. Once again, everybody, thank you for listening and for joining me today. As I said before, if you have any suggestions or any pieces you would like covered or would like to add a segment to these videos for whatever reason, please feel free to make a comment below of this YouTube video, or feel free to email me at bandlitreviews@gmail.com. I look forward to the next episode. Thank you again for watching and listening, and we'll catch you next time.